Going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order for October 17th, 2022. Welcome everyone for attending this evening, and we are meeting remotely as well, so welcome those who are participating remotely via WebEx. We will start with our Pledge of Allegiance. Before I do so, just for the record, Councilors Sweeney and Quinnell are both absent and excused tonight. Carter, if you could lead us in the pledge, I'd be honored. Thank you very much, Carter. We'll move on to item 3 of our agenda, which is communications from the public. If you're here to speak tonight on our one public hearing, I would just ask that you wait until I call that public hearing, and then we'll welcome your comments. Otherwise, if there's anything you'd like to bring to the attention of the council, now would be your opportunity. Just at the podium, your name and address for the record, please. Any public comment tonight? Any public comments? Not seeing any. We'll move on to item 4, and we do have a presentation tonight. I didn't see any online comment.
We're having some issues with online right now.
That's probably why I didn't see any.
So, yeah, just
Okay.
one moment.
We can always circle back to public comments at a later time, but I will move on to item 4, which is communications from volunteer boards. We have Dylan here this evening for our consideration of a request from the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau to amend the public portion of the FY23 budget. Dylan, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Mulfield. Good evening, and good evening, City Councilors. My name is Dylan Boyle. I'm the Executive Director of the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau, also known as Explore Whitefish. And I'm here tonight to request an amendment to the public portion of our FY23 budget. And this information is on page 40 in your packet. Each year for our public bed tax funds, after the fiscal year ends, we go through an audit process with the Montana Department of Commerce, and that audit took place in mid-August of this year. That final audit was then approved, as well as the use of any uncommitted funds from that previous fiscal year. That was approved by the Montana Tourism Advisory Council on October 10th. And this year we have $11,700 in rollover funds that are available to allocate in the FY23 budget. Those are funds that were approved already in the FY22 public portion of the budget. So I worked with our staff as well as our board of directors on allocating those recommended rollover funds, and those are being recommended to existing line items in the FY23 public budget. So that would be the product development line item, which I know I'd talked to you guys about at my last presentation, which is a new line item and allowable expense for bed tax funds, which actually allows for on-the-ground improvements to be made, which can help both visitor and residents. So we're excited about that. We're also adding some funds to our opportunity marketing, considering it is still pretty early in our fiscal year. There are things that do come up that aren't currently budgeted for, as well as we would like to increase a little bit of funds in the education and outreach for a Leave No Trace partnership, which helps us to provide some more education and outreach as part of our comprehensive Friend of the Fish campaign. And once again, I'm here tonight to request an amendment to our FY23 public budget of $11,700, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Dylan. Any questions for Dylan on the amendments? I had a quick question, Dylan. Just out of curiosity, under the new line item product development, what is, quote, on-the-ground improvements? Do you have some examples? What does that mean?
Sure. So some of the things that we were looking at is basically we can partner with a nonprofit or a municipality for things that could be beneficial. So it's sort of still up in the air of kind of what some of those could be in terms of the language. However, some of the things that we were looking at are things like improvements to the snow bus stops would be a great example of that, retrofitting some of those to include some of the Whitefish town maps, knowledge that there is Wi-Fi, and basically just ways to hopefully increase awareness of the snow bus and ridership as well. So that would be a great example of those bus stops are located on city property, as well as working with the Snow Bus, which is a nonprofit.
Great. Good use of funds for sure. Any questions for Dylan? We do need a motion to authorize the amendment to the public portion of the FY23 budget for the CVB. Rhonda,
Rebecca.
excuse me, Rebecca.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the budget amendment for the CVB of $11,700 in rollover funds to be allocated to product development, opportunity marketing, and education outreach.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Davis. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. Dylan, thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Great to see you. Brings us on to item 5 of our agenda, which is our consent agenda. You do have the October 3rd, 2022 regular meeting minutes, including Resolution 22-32. Can I have a motion? Giuseppe.
Yes, Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Second by Councilor Norton. Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor, as you know, I voted against the transportation plan last time as a negating vote. I cannot extract it, so we might go as well ahead with it.
Okay. Thanks, Giuseppe. Further comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Which brings us on quickly to our one public hearing of the evening, which is item 6A on our agenda, consideration of a request from True North Partners LLC for a preliminary plat to develop a 29-lot subdivision located at 6335 Highway 93 South. Wendy.
Hi. Good evening. I also have a PowerPoint presentation that hopefully Michelle can doesn't take her computer down. There we go. All right. So the applicant is proposing a 29-lot subdivision on 13.45 acres. The property will be bisected with a new public right-of-way, a north-south extension of Shiloh Avenue, Whitefish Avenue. On the west side of Shiloh Whitefish Avenue, the applicant is proposing 5 lots with the WB2 zoning district with a new east-west connector between Highway 93 and then the new extension of Shiloh Whitefish Avenue. In addition, there will be an access easement for the Dalen Dental down to that east-west connector. On the east side of Shiloh Whitefish Avenue, the applicant is proposing 24 lots, which is 48 townhouses, with a looped public right-of-way connecting Shiloh Avenue to Lenajoy Drive. All the lots will access the newly constructed loop road or the existing public Lenajoy Drive. The applicant is also dedicating 1.01 acres of parkland along the Whitefish Avenue. Within that river buffer area, the city has a 20-foot wide easement from 2018 to locate and construct a shared use path. Finally, no subdivision variances are being requested, so this project is eligible for an expedited review, so that's why there's no planning board recommendation that's accompanying this request. The property is located at 6335 Highway 93 South. Can you go to the next slide, please? The existing land use designation is split between general commercial, and then the urban designation. The property has split zoning as well, with the WB2 on the west side and the WR2 on the east side. The property is surrounded by commercial uses, the Whitefish River, and residential uses. The project is served by all public services and facilities. Staff noticed adjacent landowners, placed a sign on the subject property, noticed advisory agencies, and a legal was placed in the pilot. We did receive 4 public comments, and then you got one just this afternoon. Folks are concerned with the extension of Shiloh, Whitefish Avenue, the increase in traffic, the lack of a light at Acres Avenue, tree retention along the north property line, density, drainage, snow removal, and then there was questions about access and the development of the Whitefish River shared use path. Next slide, please. We review subdivisions according to state law and the Whitefish zoning and subdivision regulations. Under effects on health and safety, the fire marshal has reviewed the project and will have access via the public streets. Oops, one above it, there we go. And hydrants will be required to be installed every 300 feet. Most of the property is outside of the floodplain. There's a small corner in the southeast corner that has some floodplain, but that's not proposed to have any development and will be within the parkland dedication. All lots, again, will have access to public streets. Next slide. The applicant did conduct a TIS, a traffic impact study, according to the engineering standards. At full build-out, the project would have 653 daily vehicle trips per day. However, they are completing that extension for Shiloh Avenue and Whitefish Avenue, and these are just some images from the plans that you folks have reviewed and approved over the years since 1999, showing the extension of Whitefish Avenue or Shiloh Avenue. So this plan and this connection has long been planned and has been, identified as an ability for folks that local traffic can use versus having to go all the way out to the highway, add traffic to the highway, and then turn and go back into different services along the highway. And the TIS acknowledges that the full connection of this road will help disperse traffic. So we are recommending a condition of approval that the entire road be constructed to the north connecting to Whitefish Avenue. The TIS also notes that the traffic's not going to create any roadway capacity issues and will improve traffic circulation with the road being completed. Next slide. Under effects of wildlife and habitat, there's no crucial wildlife habitat or daily or seasonal migration corridors. However, it's very likely that animals are using this property to travel along the river and through the surrounding neighborhoods like everywhere else in town. Staff did notify Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, but we did not receive any comments. Under effects of natural environment, the Whitefish River is the eastern boundary of the property. There's no other surface water on the property, and groundwater monitoring will take place as part of the engineering plan review. Along the Whitefish River, we do have a buffer of top of bank or 75 feet, whichever is greater. And so they've identified the buffer area as the part of the area that would be parkland dedication. Development within 200 feet of the buffer must submit a geotech letter to accompany building permits, and staff is recommending that as a condition of approval. Also, the rear property lines are the setback, the river buffer setback. And so we'll also note a note on the face of the plat that those lots need to adhere to the river setback requirements. The majority of the property has slopes less than 10%. The areas that are steepest are along the river, and it is quite steep along that river, but no structures are proposed in that area. There's no stormwater conveyances. They did submit a preliminary drainage plan, which the Public Works Department reviewed and didn't have any major concerns with at this point, which will be reviewed and approved after the project is approved here. Water is available in the highway, Shiloh Avenue, Whitefish Avenue, and Lena Joy. So the property will be extending water as well as sewer, which is also in the right-of-way. No frontage, as far as streets, there's no frontage improvements required out on the highway. It's got the full curb gutter, sidewalk, street lights. The 3 new public streets will be built to city street standards with sidewalks, boulevards, street trees. On the local access streets, the applicant will have the option to pay a fee in lieu of installing street trees. So once the homes are built and they receive occupancy, then the Parks Department the following year goes out and plants the trees. And this seems to have worked pretty well. This isn't an option on Shiloh Whitefish Avenue because it is more of a major street. Lena Joy Drive was constructed with the Riverwood Park subdivision in the early 2000s. It's a 45-foot wide right-of-way. So as part of this project, the applicant will be required to dedicate an additional 15 feet and install full frontage improvements. So according to state law and our subdivision regulations, they are obligated to provide some parkland dedication. The non-residential lots are exempt from parkland, so that would be the lots on the west side. The residential lots on the east side are less than half an acre, so the calculation is 11% of the net acreage. For this particular subdivision, they'd be obligated to dedicate 26,832 square feet. And our subdivision regulations go on to say if it's less than an acre, then we'd request an HOA park. However, the applicant has identified the entirety of the Whitefish River buffer, which is a little bit more than an acre, to be dedicated as parkland. So that is exceeding their minimum requirement that they're supposed to do. The park board reviewed this on October 11th, and they voted to accept the parkland along the river. This property has been used for agriculture in its recent past prior to being annexed, but it was an island of county and is served by all public services and facilities, and no surrounding property is being used for agricultural right now. The preliminary plat complies with the growth policy land use designation of commercial and urban. The extension of Shiloh Whitefish Avenue has long been a part of adopted transportation plans since 1999. The highway corridor contemplated urban development in this area and the extension of the road as well. So staff is recommending approval of the preliminary plat subject to 18 conditions of approval. Just to hit some of the highlights here, we are recommending a condition for a tree preservation and retention plan to be submitted at the time of final plat. There are some trees along the north property line that potentially could be incorporated into the design of the lots. We request an additional 15 feet of right-of-way along the north side of Lemon Joy to make it a full 60-foot, including full frontage improvements. We request the parkland be dedicated at the time of final plat. We request the Shiloh Whitefish Avenue extension be made to the north where it connects to Whitefish Avenue and the Riverview Meadows subdivision with full frontage improvements on both sides. Some notes on the face of the plat. The lots on the east side, we don't want to see them have direct access onto Whitefish Avenue, Shiloh. Lots 24 through 25, which are the ones along the river, must submit a geotech along with their building permit application and adhere to the additional river setback requirements. And then finally, the use of garage for 2-unit structures is not allowed. That's in the subdivision regulations as well as the architectural review. Can I answer any questions for you?
Thanks, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy on her staff report? Rebecca, and then Ben?
Yep. So Wendy, this property was flooded at one point. I thought it was when some apartments were built and MDT didn't factor in the drainage, and so we actually had to pay that landowner money because he lost hay that year. So I just was checking. I think Karen told me that that was corrected through the build out. But Craig, do you know anything about that? When that was corrected, because it was water trespassing onto this property. And it was probably maybe 10, 12 years ago. So it might be before your time.
Yeah, it was before my time. I'm not familiar with the circumstances, but my guess is that the work that was done on the subdivision to the south, which included quite a bit of management, alleviated that situation. Not to mention the MDT pond that exists to the south of this property as well, south of Lenajoy. But I'm not entirely familiar with the circumstance you're
Yeah, the
talking
water
about.
came from the west side of the, and then it went underneath Highway 93 to flood this area. So anyways, I knew the person that had this impact, and that's why I was thinking about it. I just wanted to make sure it was corrected. And then
So real quickly, Rebecca, we did work with the property owner during the construction of Whitefish Crossing, which was the apartment buildings on the west side of Highway 93. And now that you mention that, I do recall there was a drainage easement that was granted in order to convey that stormwater, and the property owner did have us do some grading during that stormwater work to alleviate some of the the flooding concerns that he had. So that may have also played into it. That storm sewer was installed probably in 2018.
so as far as you know, that's been corrected.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to bring it up because I wouldn't want this to have that happen after we've already had that history. And then the other thing I was wondering about is I did walk the property, and it is a steep decline down to the river, but I'm wondering, could we have them put in stairs so that there would be some way for the public to go up and down from the trail up to the street, so that we'd have more connectivity for people that are walking along there, and so I wasn't sure. It wouldn't be ADA compliant, but I still think we should be working on connectivity along the trail, so.
On page 270 of your packet, I took a photo of a trail that's from the end of the cul-de-sac that goes down to the trail. And it also, it's very, very steep.
Right,
So-
that's why I was thinking steps might work.
So the interesting thing with a straight-up subdivision that's not asking for any deviations is they just need to meet the minimum requirements for parkland dedication. So they're only obligated to dedicate, the almost half, or a little more than half an acre. We can't obligate them to do more than what the parkland dedication requirement is. So that's all improvements to a parkland plus the land or any combination thereof, so.
But it's basically unusable land that's being donated because it's too steep for anybody to access.
Well,
So Rebecca, sorry, Wendy, I
go
don't mean
ahead.
to interrupt
Go
you.
ahead.
There will actually be a trail built there, Rebecca, but like they're dedicating almost 3 times more than they're required to dedicate. And as far as the subdivision regs go, we can ask them or require them to dedicate land. We can't require them to dedicate the improvements to the land. So
But we, as a city, could do the improvements if we put
We
that
could
in
do
our
them.
conditions
Yeah,
to allow that.
absolutely.
But do
Yeah,
I,
we could do the improvements ourselves, Rebecca. But as far as requiring them to build out the improvements, so the state subdivision regs changed a little bit in 2021, and you have to actually tie any conditions to some very specific criteria with respect to the subdivision, and it doesn't really fit the criteria that we could tie it to. We can build it ourselves, and again, they're dedicating more than that than is required, but yeah, we can't really require them to do that just as a dedication of subdivisions.
so Angie, and the reason why I bring this up is I think we've seen erosion occur along the river from previous developments, even that were planned as access points. And so I just would like us to be proactive because people will be accessing this trail. And if it's not hardscaped with an intentional location to access the trail from this development, and I'm just afraid that it will cause more erosion. And so I don't know exactly how to do that other than making sure that we can do that so that we don't cause further erosion. So I guess I'm wondering if I could recognize Maria since her hand is up.
I'd like to stick with questions for staff. If we do get a motion on the table for approval, we can then bring this up for further discussion.
Like, how do I find the answer, though?
Once we have a motion on the table,
Oh,
you
okay.
can ask the question if you don't mind. We'll just stick with questions for right now rather than commentary. Other questions for staff? Ben?
Wendy, so just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, there is that narrow parcel to the north of this, and your conditions proposing that they be required to pave the road all the way through that parcel, all the way up to Whitefish Avenue?
Correct.
Okay.
We have an easement across the Les Schwab, and I believe it's the full 60 feet.
Okay, so even though it's not on their parcel, we're still.
Right. Part of the transportation impact study identified that connection as an important part of dispersing the traffic.
Okay. My next question is for Lenajoy Drive. I believe there was 1 or 2 comments from the public concerning the maintenance requirements of that road. Is that a public or a private road?
It's a public street.
Okay, so it's okay that the new development is accessing on that road. The maintenance of it is covered by the city, basically.
Yep,
Okay.
it's a standard public street.
Okay. And then my last question is for Craig. Well, I have 2, I guess. One, do you have any concerns at all about adding a new road onto Highway 93? The Geyser Road? There's a new intersecting street.
The new approach that would
Yeah.
tie into Highway 93.
Yeah.
No, but that will be evaluated. As we move forward, they'll need an encroachment permit to do that. Do that further, but it's something that we do want to see.
Okay. The TIS on this project seemed to indicate that traffic flow would generally be better after this development than before. Is that an accurate assessment, you think?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. I know that our transportation plan does call for intersection improvements at Acres Lane and Highway 93 down the road.
It does, yes.
Yeah. Do you think we're remiss to not ask for larger scale developments to share some of the cost burden of those kinds of upgrades?
You know, we have in the past, when the section of Acres Lane was constructed east of 93, we did have the developer pay for, I don't know if we called it cash in lieu, but they did put money into a fund or pay some cash for a future signal. Because this project is dispersing into a couple of different locations on Highway 93, we didn't think that was necessary. But we have in the past, the precedence there.
Sure. If you thought it was necessary, so you already looked at it and decided it's probably not needed in this case?
Correct, yeah. I mean, we could run the actual calculation. I believe there was a specific percentage of additional, vehicle trips that the previous project was going to cause to Acres Lane, and we used that based on what the anticipated cost of the signal was. It's something we could look at, but we didn't think it was necessary for this project based on the new connection to Highway 93 that was being proposed.
Okay. I mean, on a project like this, I mean, what do you think that percentage would be? I mean, are we talking some really small number or something more significant?
I'd have to look at the TIS. I can do that and get back to you, though.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure that I can. I'd need the total trip counts on 93. It's something we could look at prior to,
I don't think it goes down quite that detailed.
Yeah.
It's going Highway 93 north, Highway 93 south, and then JP Road east.
Okay. I'm okay. Thank you.
You good? Giuseppe, any questions? Michelle, do you mind putting the map back up, showing the lot layout in relation to the river and the setback? Kind of a follow-up to Rebecca's question. Oop, there you have it. That's all right. So, Wendy, you indicated that the eastern lots that border the river, the eastern property lines correspond, was it with the 75-foot?
No, the top of
buffer,
bank. The top of bank. Yeah, it's the river buffer is the back property lines.
And is that a 75-foot buffer, or is that the 200-foot?
I think it's top of bank.
So
top of bank or 75 feet, whichever is greater, and the top of bank is greater. So that's what they're showing there.
So the top of bank is demarcated by the left side of the green hatching? Okay, so that's the physical top of bank.
That's when it really dives down,
Okay.
yeah.
So do we have any idea of how that proposed lot line configuration superimposes on the existing vegetation along the river? Like, are they proposing to remove trees along the bank and terrace of the river, or are we outside of that area, given the buffer and setback?
Could you go to the very last slide, Michelle? I did a little Google Earth shot.
I'm just
I don't know if
curious.
it's gonna show you the exact oh, that's a little too hard to read. But the buffer area, obviously, no vegetation will be removed from there. But in the setback, the river setback, you can do some vegetation management.
So if we're concerned at all with geotechnical issues with this site and along the river as a general proposition, you had mentioned tree preservation and retention plan. Could we require as part of this approval that all of the trees along the eastern property be preserved as part of the tree retention plan, even if that exceeds our water quality ordinance. Because I'd like to see that buffer preserved in its entirety.
Right. So there is, of course, a 20-foot rear yard setback. So, obviously anything within a building envelope, they would remove if there were any trees in that area.
But can we require those trees to be preserved as part of the tree retention plan?
I mean, I think they could go out and identify which trees are healthy and, within the setback area that could be preserved, yeah.
What about trees that are outside of the setback area that we'd like to preserve?
That's part of the tree retention plan. That's the standard, subdivision requirements.
So then we can require that all those trees be preserved as a
Well, everything
component of both.
outside of a building footprint, driveways, and then the healthy trees, of course, they, could preserve. But if it's, not healthy, not long-lived trees, then they would probably come out as how homes are being built.
And who makes those determinations? Our city arborist or their consultants?
We could work with the city arborist. They'll submit a plan as part of their, usually it seems to be coming with the engineering plans, which is kind of a nice time because they're doing a lot of dirt moving and stuff. So that's usually when we see those plans. But we definitely consult with Philip and Jen.
Okay. Well,
'Cause
keep
they
that
are-
in your mind as we move through the public hearing. I'd like to see if there is a motion for approval on this, that we add a condition to that effect of some sort.
It would be a good place to put it in the setback requirements for those lots, the 20 through 25.
Okay. Thank you. I'll give you some time to think about that. Maria?
Though the city arborist can provide information to city staff when we're approving engineering plans to make sure that they're not impacting trees, we typically require that the developer hire an arborist for their own, for the development, to make sure that they are meeting the requirements prior to. You don't want to get some engineering plans that would conflict with preserving trees, and then they're approved, and then it's tree versus plan, which we have seen in the past. So we really recommend that the developer hire an arborist to make sure that they're meeting that requirement ahead of time. And then the city arborist consults with staff to make sure that those plans are meeting the requirements.
Okay. I'll stay with you, Maria. Quick question. The proposed trail easement for our bike ped system, is that a meets and bounds alignment or just a generalized alignment?
It is a meets and bounds, and that is why the park board wanted to accept that land as parkland, because if we go to the permitting phase with the 124 permit and that is not approved by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, then we have the ability, the flexibility to move that to a place where it would meet the
That was
requirement.
exactly where I was heading with that question. So, great. Thanks very much. Further questions for staff before we go to our public hearing? Absolutely. So we will hold a public hearing. We did advertise for a public hearing, and we will hold one now for item 6A of our agenda. I will start with the applicant as the applicant present. Then would you have anything additional to add, sir? And your name and address for the record, please.
All right, I'm Dom Goebel. I work for Morris Merrily. I represent the applicant, True North Partners. My address is 96 Northern Lights Boulevard in Kalispell. So I'm here, I can answer any questions. A couple of things is that, water, sewer, stormwater, we're going to be reviewed by the state, we're going to be reviewed by the city, making sure that meet all the requirements. We've met with MDT already. We've had a scoping meeting with them to work with the access. They actually had us move the access down to where it's currently at. We actually had it farther north, and they moved it down to the south, so it intersects with Hampton in access. So we've already started the conversations with them. We're aware of the permits that we would need to get for them. Also for that bike path along the Water Protection Bureau, it is an existing easement. Just want to make sure you guys were aware of that. It's existing, not a proposed easement, so it's already there in place.
Sure.
And then we are aware of the condition of extending Shallow Avenue to connect into Whitefish Avenue, and we had already part of our plans, so we were aware of that as well. So we've already started to figure out that.
Great, appreciate that. Any questions for the applicant's representative, Rebecca?
Yeah, so do you, as a developer, I'm assuming the people that are buying these will be accessing the trail system too. So have you talked about having steps down through there, or, because just one a little bit north of here had some failure of the slopes, and it was a gradual switchback and then another area. And I kind of feel like if it could be hardscaped so that the people that are going to live there would be directed to that area, I think it would preserve the slopes better instead of having people bushwhack through and, kids and dogs and all
Right.
that, or carrying kayaks down or whatever.
Yeah, and I believe the applicant has actually talked to a neighbor there where the picture of that trail has gone down. So there has been some discussion about that as well. So if we need to, we'd work with the city for that.
Would you be open to a condition of having it hardscaped? Just, it's beneficial to your development to be successful and not having failure down there too,
Yeah, it was, sorry, Tracy Poole, member of True North Partners, the developer. Yes, I got a phone call and it was brought to my attention that the existing trail, I remember when we purchased the property, we had walked down there and I actually didn't think much about what that trail system current status or current state of condition that it is in. And so without looking into the great detail of what is the access to the trail off of the end of that cul-de-sac there, we assumed that that was the access. So if there needs to be some improvement to that or something of that nature, we are certainly in support of contributing to improve that access or put steps in or something of that nature.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I mean, it might be too steep to have a long curved ADA compliant thing, but it would be great if you would work with us on that so that we could make sure it's stable and doesn't start to fail.
You bet.
All right.
That makes sense. We'd be supportive of that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions for the applicants? Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Any public comment tonight on this item? Sir.
Yes. My name is Jay Lerner. I live on Leonard Joy.
Jay, we're going to start with folks that are in attendance here
sorry.
first, and then we'll go to remote comments. If you just bear with me for a few minutes.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Bing. I reside at 358 Bonita Circle. I also am president of the Riverview Meadows Homeowners Association and also in attendance as our other board members. So we have a lot of concerns about this project. One of them is we received the notice of the plat plan approval, but we never received notice of the zoning change that was done. Because my understanding is that the zoning was sent to people only within 150 feet, and the plat plan was sent to people within 300 feet. We would have been appreciative of knowing about it at the point when it was being rezoned, because we as homeowners in our area feel it would have been better served as single-family homes versus duplexes. So we wanted to check and see if our understanding is correct, that zoning is only 150 feet and plat plans are 300.
Wendy, do you mind just answering that real quickly?
So it's both of them actually are 150 feet. For a major subdivision, it's 300 feet. The maps were different, and I called the plat room because that's where we get all of our, or the GIS office. And the one that extended and gave more notice was actually an error. The zoning map change was actually accurate. So the second one where we're notifying more folks was actually the error.
So we wouldn't have received notice at all?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That kind of concerns me as a citizen of not knowing what's going on in my neighborhood, but because we're about 170 feet, so just 20 feet. One of our big concerns in walking the property is the trees, not only the trees that you mentioned, Mayor, that are on the river, but also the trees that are on the north side of the property that separate Schwab from that piece of property. And we're very concerned because it provides a buffer for our subdivision as well, and we'd like to see some way that those can also be preserved. We were wondering, because our subdivision is private roads, therefore our developer made a decision to make them narrower, if it might be to change the subdivision road to narrower roads therefore being able to move back the lot lines closer in and save all of those trees that are on that side. Because we don't want something to happen similar to what happened at the town pump where they said, yes, we're going to preserve the trees, and then all of a sudden they're gone. So is there a possibility of having them amend that and change that?
This typically isn't a Q&A session,
Okay.
but we can take your comment and address this with staff after public
Okay.
hearing, with all due respect.
That's fine. Then we were wondering what the plan is timeframe-wise for the extension of Shiloh Avenue, and also going across on what if Les Schwab doesn't want it done? Because it's our understanding that they don't. Talking to the management and the real estate team of Les Schwab. Because we don't want it done, if possible, for quite a while, because it directly impacts our subdivision. Those are our comments, and if there's not questions that we can ask, that's our comments.
Thanks,
I'll leave
Andrew.
it to some of my other board members if they want to make comments.
Sure. Appreciate your comments tonight. Further comments from the board? Other board members present or others?
Good evening. My name is Jamie Bemis. I'm a resident at 763 Lenajoy. And a couple of comments, thank you. One comment that I have is a concern about the accuracy of the TIS, because I just learned, or it was said that Lenajoy is public per road maintenance, but Lenajoy was not mentioned in the TIS. So I'd like that to be reviewed or redone for accuracy. And then the other concern, especially with that, is increasing 15 feet on Lenajoy, that should be looked at. And then I would also appreciate the concerns for the riverbank erosion, especially for snow removal of increased residential townhouses or single-family homes. That's going to add to spring melt-off, depleting that riparian zone, especially if there isn't a pathway that's created. If we're looking at, trying to maintain the integrity of the riverbank and the wildlife that can exist there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Further comments this evening? Michelle, anyone online? We do, okay. I think we had the one gentleman earlier, Jay Lerner, I believe. There he is. I think you may be muted, Jay.
Can you hear me now?
We can, thanks. Sorry about that
I'm
earlier.
sorry. Yeah, WebEx just kicked me off for a second, and Jamie was just getting up there, and I unfortunately didn't hear what she said, so excuse me if I repeat
No
some
problem.
of the things. I live on Lenajoy also. I'm at the end town unit by the cul-de-sac. There is a picture of the man-made bushwhack path that goes along the side of my house. Some of the things that I wanted to talk about is on this little under 6 acres, they're planning on putting up 48 duplexes. And it's my understanding that driveways are not allowed in the front of the house anymore. So what is the plan? Because there are 14 townhomes on the other side of Lenajoy that have front driveways that come out onto the street. How are they going to access the townhomes on Lenajoy from the front, from an alleyway on the side, from the back? And if they are going to be accessing them from the front, how is that going to impact traffic on both sides of the street? How is that going to impact snow removal? Because right now that's a curb on an empty lot. So when the snow removal comes, they push it all the way down to the end by the cul-de-sac, or across on the other side. If you can't push it against either side of the street, then all the snow is going to go down to the end of the cul-de-sac where there's a guardrail, and that's probably going to affect erosion of that riverbank at some point. So that was a concern. It's great that we're having access that goes to acres, and we think that that's going to alleviate traffic on 93. But you have to realize also that there's a lot of commercial use on Shiloh that accesses the back of Don K. Subaru and Wright's Furniture at this point, and big tractor trailers come down that road to go into those places. So, you know, I think it was the Riverwood gentleman who got up and was talking about his development, which is right on Shiloh. So you're going to have in a neighborhood, which is their neighborhood along Ariel Way, which is part of the bigger, I think it's Riverwood's HOA, and Leonard Joy, some commercial traffic that's going to be whizzing through on a neighborhood. So one of the things we have to look at is traffic control and speed control. That's the concern. The road, I think it's called Gallatin, that comes through this development, looks like it's an L shape that's going to empty out at the cul-de-sac on Leonard Joy. So again, 48 townhomes having access to Leonard Joy when there's already 14 on it. I'm not sure the width of Leonard Joy is sufficient enough to handle all of that traffic. And one of the last concerns is this. That cul-de-sac was there a long time ago when the bridge was built. So a lot of locals come and use that area to either get into the river with kayaks and rafts or exit the river. Right now, what's happened over the years is they bushwhacked on the side of that cul-de-sac, which is right opposite, right next to my house. So on a daily basis, they'd be parking along the guardrail, which was used for emergency vehicle turnaround. So, you know, thankfully that's been stopped with no parking along the guardrails because it needs to be for emergency use. But we were talking about the applicant putting in a paved path that would give access to the river path for bikers and walkers. So I would highly recommend and hope that the board would want to see that happen so that people coming along or across the bridge or along the path has a walkway to get up to the streets of that development, the streets of Leonard Joy, as opposed to the steep, rocky, you know, man-made bushwhack path it's the south side of the cul-de-sac. So something that can be developed on the north side of the cul-de-sac would be greatly appreciated.
Not such a big line.
Thanks, Jay, for your comments tonight.
Thank you.
Michelle, anyone further via WebEx tonight?
Rhonda, do you want to speak towards this public hearing, or are you just listening in? I think she's just listening in, probably for the end of this meeting discussion.
Okay.
But can I add just one thing, just
Sure.
for those that are attending? If you are attending and we get kicked off again, you can view our meeting live through the YouTube City of Whitefish channel. So if you get kicked off and we are back and forth, that might be a better option since public hearing probably is coming to an end. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. On that note, we will go ahead and close the public hearing, and I'll turn it back to the council, preferably for a motion to initiate discussion. Rebecca.
I'll make a motion to approve WPP 22-07.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Davis. Rebecca, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I just have a few comments. I think we have a transportation plan that requires us to create connectivity with our accessory roads, and so I just wanted to confirm with our planning staff that even if Les Schwab isn't in favor of it, we still have the right to do that. Is that correct? And our Public Works?
We do. We have a 60-foot roadway and utility easement that grants us that right.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure. And then Maria, I'd like to just, I'm not sure, since you're the Parks Director, how we would, I'd like to put in a condition that would require the developer to work with us on an access point, either a long sloped ramp or stairs. But this is your job, not mine, and so I don't know if I'm stepping on your toes saying that. But I do think that we've had public testimony saying it's already used for kayak and possible things that will cause more erosion. And so I'd rather it would be hardscaped and intentional so that we direct people how to get up and down there. And I'd like it to be public as well. So are you okay if I write a condition to do that?
Though I would love to ask the developer to put in the infrastructure to access, we cannot require the developer to add any infrastructure to this parkland dedication. And so because we're accepting the parkland dedication, what we can do as the city is create a plan for the access point. Once we identify where the trail is going to be, then we can identify where the access points should be, and we would have to budget for that and then implement that ourselves.
And we would pay for it?
We would have to do that, yes.
Yep. But the developer would be giving us, we already have the access. We already have the easement already, right?
They are dedicating the 1.01 acres of parkland, so that's what they're providing to the city.
And you're sure that we actually have the access? Because it looked like on the map that it was actually going to be one of the lots that we would have to go through to get there.
Where I would likely do an access point would be more off of the cul-de-sac and not through a lot. It would be more off of a street right of way.
Okay, as long as you're pretty sure we can do that.
It is steep there. We have looked at that before. It would probably have to be stairs, and we would have to go through a permitting process. So I can't guarantee that we can accomplish anything in there, but what I can tell you is we can't require them to put stairs in there at this point. That's something that the city would have to budget for and do.
Okay, he has promised that he'll be cooperative though, and it's to their advantage. I know. Okay, maybe
I
I'm
would
naive.
defer to Angie on that.
But it is to your advantage, to everybody that you're selling it to have a safe way to get down there, as you know, right? Okay, so I would like to...
We could work with the developer, but I don't suggest making it in a condition of the approval of the subdivision. It just because their state law is very different in 2022 after the last legislature. So we need to directly relate any conditions of subdivision approval to, very specific things. And I think it's lovely that they would like to work with us and we can continue to work with them. But at this point, I wouldn't put it as a condition.
Okay, thank you,
I
Angie.
just don't think it will stand up. Yeah, and again, I think it's lovely that they want to work with us, but maybe we can continue with Maria and I and continue to work with them, but I don't want to condition something that we can't uphold.
Okay, I would like to add one other condition, that the developer shall hire an arborist to help preserve trees on lots 23, 24, and 25 to help with bank stabilization. Okay.
Is that a formal motion to amend the conditions?
Yes, it would be an additional condition. You want me to reread it?
It would be condition number 19.
Can we add it to condition number 6? It's already about tree preservation.
Okay, can you read that out loud, Wendy?
A tree preservation retention plan must be submitted at the time of final plat compliant with the requirements outlined in 12.4.5 of the Whitefish subdivision regulations. Can we just add?
The developer shall hire an arborist to help preserve trees on lots 23, 24, and 25 to help with bank stabilization. We don't want this to fail. and we know that that soil can be difficult. And so I'd rather that we mandated it to make sure that you're going to be successful and not have litigation later on potentially. We've seen that happen with other developments along the river.
Wendy, do you have an issue with that amendment or change to condition number 8?
Well, we were talking about possibly putting it under 13, the notes on the face of the plat, that, again, lots 20 through 25 are the ones that are along the river, saying that any existing healthy trees, including those trees outside the river buffer and setback, must be retained.
And that addresses my comment earlier, correct?
What
Are you
about-
okay with that language, Rebecca?
I'd like an arborist to be involved in that decision-making.
Working in conjunction with the
Could
city
we-
arborist?
Could we add, under number 6, a tree preservation retention plan developed by an arborist?
Yeah. Do we have to say certified arborist?
I
or-
have no idea.
Okay. So where are we at then? Under number 6, we're just gonna go with, could you reread that to us, Wendy?
Second here. Okay. Number 6, a tree preservation retention plan developed by a certified arborist must be submitted at the time of final plat compliant with the requirements outlined in 12.4.5 of the Whitefish subdivision regulations. And then adding to number 13, the notes on the face of the plat, the last bullet, any existing healthy trees, including those trees outside the river buffer and setback, must be retained.
So we're not gonna specifically mention the ones along the river?
Yeah, lots 20 through, sorry, I should have read the whole thing. So the final bullet, which will be a note on the face of the plat, lots 20 through 25 must adhere to the additional river setback requirements in the water quality protection regulations. And any existing healthy trees, including those trees outside the river buffer and setback, must be retained.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Rebecca, can you rephrase your friendly amendment to include amendments to condition number 6 as well as condition number 13 and see if we have a second, please?
Okay, could I have Wendy read it?
I think she just did.
Okay, so then we'll just defer to what Wendy said as my conditions.
For condition number 6 as well as 13?
Yes, thank you.
Suggested amendments. Is there a second to that friendly amendment?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Fury. Further discussion on the amendments to conditions 6 and 13? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Further amendments to the conditions of approval? Further questions for staff? I had just a few. During public comment, there was mention that, I don't have the map pulled up now. What's the lane that traverses through the center of the subdivision? Gallatin, is that correct?
Correct.
That's going to basically connect in with the cul-de-sac on Lena Joy. There was a comment made that the traffic impact study did not evaluate Lena Joy and the cumulative effects on the level of service. Is that correct?
Who are we asking that?
Not you.
Okay,
Our
sorry.
staff. No, it's okay, Jay. Our public
Well, I'll tell
works
you,
director.
I read their whole plan. They didn't mention Leonard Joy once.
I'm just
trying
deferring
to
to our
pull up
public
the
works
traffic
director.
impact study.
Jay, is there a way that you can mute yourself? Because we're not able to mute you here.
Okay. My wife's been saying that for years.
Sorry. It just kind of gives us feedback with our other
That was
audio.
funny. You know what? I'm not finding where it is now. Hold on.
Glad to see we're both bringing some humor to the table, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, so the intent of a traffic impact study is really to evaluate corridors and not specific intersections of this level. And so I'm looking through it and I don't see any trip evaluation on Lenajoy.
How many daily trips are projected for the full build-out of this subdivision? 600 plus?
Yeah.
And if we can make an assumption that a majority are going to egress or ingress off Lenajoy, then how come that wasn't evaluated?
I don't know that I'd make the assumption that,
At least a portion of.
but yeah, a portion of them are. I'm just trying to look through to see if there's any discussion of that.
Is this something you can answer as the applicant's engineer? I understand, yeah.
They're another engineering firm.
Sure.
So one thing is, as part of our plan, cul-de-sacs aren't allowed unless there's a bridge or something, so we had to create a loop for that. So that's what our loop's for. I'm not sure I think how it looked, when it looked recently, I think Avalon traffic engineers, I think they estimated 7.5 trips per unit. So I guess we can kind of do some quick math there, but I'm not sure how, what percentage would go through Lenajoy versus how many would go to the north, especially if it is a 45-foot right away from Lenajoy. I'm assuming most will probably go over 60-foot where there's a little bit bigger, bit less or more access to it. So I'm not sure how that split would work. I don't know the percentage. Yeah, I don't know what the breakdown would be for that. Sure. But I know like I think 14 units are connected to Lenajoy, so those will probably directly access Lenajoy, and then the rest will probably do to the north will be going off of Gallatin to Shiloh, and then go south or north, and then commercial will all access from Shiloh.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Craig?
Yeah, although I don't have specific trip information on Lenajoy, I can tell you the roadway does meet city standards, even though it's an insufficient amount of right-of-way. That's simply because this area was previously in the county, and so we all know that county roads are platted essentially to the center line. So there is about 26 feet of pavement out there, so it does meet city roadway standards to handle the capacity. The future intersection design at Shiloh and Lenajoy, or Whitefish Avenue and Lenajoy, would have to be updated, to accommodate the new roadway, but that would come through, the future engineering design, whether it have, 1, 2, or 3-way stop signs.
So in your opinion, is the TIS accurate?
Yeah, no, I think the TIS accomplishes what we would expect it to for this project.
Thank you. Finally, to the comment regarding snow disposal, snow removal, are we assuming that all the snow removal would then be pushed east to the cul-de-sac?
No, so our typical snow removal policy is, half goes one way, half goes the other way. If there isn't anything developed on one side of the road, then, the snow removal crews do their best to try and manage snow. The residents on the south side of Shiloh should expect to see more snow to deal with as a result of this project. We would not push it all to the end. We have snow gates that we try and use to minimize impacts to driveways, but we wouldn't push all of the snow to the cul-de-sac at the end.
Okay. And then finally, the tree preservation and retention plan, that implies that it will consider the north buffer next to Les Schwab, et cetera, on the north side of the property?
Yep, correct.
Okay. Thank you. Further comments or questions from the council? I think we do. I will take us back to our original motion, which is to approve item 6A of the agenda.
I have one typo that Dave just noticed.
Sure.
With the notes on the face of the plat, I said that it was lots 20 through 25. It's actually lots 20 through 24. So
okay.
There's those two typos that I'll correct.
Great, Wendy. That brings us back to our original motion for approval with amendments to conditions number 6 and 13 and the minor typo on the face of the preliminary plat. Further comments? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks, everyone, for participating this evening. Let folks circle out for a minute before we move on to item 7. No. All right, we'll move on to item 7A of the agenda. You have City Manager Smith's report enclosed with the packet. Any questions for Dana on her report this week? Not seeing any. Dana, anything else to report on?
The only thing that I have to report on is I would like just a council nod that I'm okay sending a letter to our representatives at the federal level regarding the financial Data Transparency Act of 2022 that is proposed to be included as part of the defense bill actually that's coming up through the feds. One of the things that they're proposing is to have the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board create these new data standards. And in fact, some of it doesn't even maybe meet gap requirements, so governmental accounting standards. So I'd just like to be able to send a letter to Senator Daines and Senator Tester asking them to not approve that portion of the bill, as it could increase costs for the city, having to have the data transparency. You know, they really don't think about what impacts it has on smaller communities, especially in Montana, and just the need for the education to change our financial reporting requirements.
Thanks, Dana. Showing of hands in support of Dana drafting that letter. Of course.
Dana, that's a federal bill, not a state bill.
It is. So it is a federal bill, and at this point, because it could have a financial impact on the city of Whitefish, I think that it's important that we raise our voice and concern for it.
Thank you.
Showing of hands to support drafting of that letter. That's approved, Dana. And one question from Rebecca.
Dana, what does the bill require us to do, and how much time would it take for us to be compliant with what it wants us to do?
You know, I haven't gone into the details of exactly how much data transparency it's going to have. They're actually giving the responsibility over to the securities board to create that data standards. So it's not that it's even very clear what we would have to do. But when, you know, we already make an effort to be transparent and allowing the communities to determine that transparency, especially when we already have the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. We have many other regulatory agencies that are overseeing our financial reporting. To require additional reporting and not provide the support or education financial to communities, it is very hard on cities. So I think it's really important that they actually involve the local level if they're going to try to push forward with legislation that affects us that way.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dana. We'll move on to item 7C, consideration of appointing members to the selection committee for the impact fee review and update. And this is on page 525 of your packet. Dana?
Great. Good evening again. So tonight I'm actually very simply asking that the City Council approve the Impact Fee Advisory Committee as the rating panel and selection committee for this year's 5-year review and update of our impact fees. We have issued a request for qualifications, and we expect those to, submittals are due this Wednesday. Last time we did our 5-year review, we did have the Impact Fee Advisory Committee also go through the same process. So since we already have a board made up, or committee made up of an elected official and a staff member and members of the public, we felt that this could continue to be a great process to move forward with. We do have a budget of $60,000. This request is just to approve the committee being the selection panel and rating panel, so no financial commitment is being made this evening. So I respectfully recommend the City Council approve the Impact Fee Advisory Committee as the rating panel and selection committee.
Can I have a motion to that effect?
Make a motion to approve.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second it.
Seconded by Councilor Caltabiano. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign. That is unanimous. Thanks very much, Dana. We'll move to item 8 of our agenda. communications from myself as well as the city council. Why don't we start on the left here tonight? Andy, any communications this evening? Okay. I'm going to go next. I think just to kind of cut to the chase, but we do have 2 work session items that I think we need to address, and then I'll clearly come back to you, Ben and Giuseppe, for comments. The first being the viaduct improvements. I'd like to give staff some feedback, and Craig in particular, and direction on how to move forward with that project, given the staff report and the public comment received this evening. Thoughts?
I did actually like what Rhonda said at the end of the meeting, which is that if we'd got the lighting done and the way to water the plants and the shared use paths done, I think it would be a nice start. I just don't know how we are going to fund it all, but I liked the plan overall.
Ben?
So I've said this up here before. I do agree that I see this as an important project for the community in the future. I mean, the viaduct is something that our citizens see and drive over every day in many cases. I personally have ridden my bike and walked across that thing a lot of times, and let me tell you, the way it sits right now, try putting a baby carrier on the back of your bike and crossing that narrow sidewalk, and then somebody has to jump over the barrier or something to get around. It's terrible. So I'm very excited to see this go forward. I mean, I do think some of these items in here are pretty expensive and may make sense to pair with other things or other future unidentified funding sources. But I would like to see, it seemed to me that the lighting part of it, and possibly the fence, but I'm on the fence, would make sense to include in the first phase of how we approach this project, in my opinion. At the same time, I want to point out the fact that we have allocated $300,000 and there isn't enough to even do the first part of that, according to the estimates that we saw in that meeting. So in my opinion, I would like to include those in those 2 items in particular. But I would also like for us to figure out how we're going to fund the darn thing. And so that seems like a question maybe we should discuss.
So your suggestion, Ben, is to move forward with phase 1 installation of the shared use path, and phase 2 the ornamental lighting. Is that correct? As a package?
That would be my opinion.
Funding pending, of course. Or pending funding. Dana, do you want to speak? Giuseppe, go ahead.
I have 2 points on this, and they're consistent with what I said back in March. And I have letters from people, and some have been forwarded to Michelle, concerned about what was discussed during the transportation plan about evacuation from the biggest cul-de-sac in Montana. I know we can drive out Edgewood, but the viaduct is another bottleneck. And Craig, I had asked if there was a scenario where we would have the room for 3 lanes, at least in case of emergency. And at that time, you talked to me about, I think, 60 or 66 feet wide carriageway that would allow for 3 lanes. I don't care if we put 1 lane right now, but I feel very uncomfortable when we look at a transportation plan that looks down 20 years down the road, and we're spending whatever we'll agree that we can spend to have only 2 lanes, 1 north and 1 south. Maybe we should consider a traffic study dedicated to that area. And maybe we've done it, and you can point to me offline, where we have 2 lanes, one way and 1 lane the other way, or a medium lane, so that in case of emergency, you can turn all 3 lanes south, or on a powder day, in the morning, you turn 2 lanes northbound and 1 southbound, and the evening the other way around. These are suggestions that came on public comments as well, but I had asked you back in March too. The other concern I have is obviously money, you know me on this, so I'm concerned about discussing anything for which, and I agree with Ben at this point, for which we, at the moment, do not see how to even fund phase one.
Further comments from the council? I had a question, Dana, or Andy, go ahead. No, go ahead first. I just had a general question, Dana. When our TIF was in its final days, which proved very fruitful for the city, obviously the entire TIF district, there was always comment made that when the TIF did sunset, that there would be this windfall of general fund revenue that we'd be able to leverage for continued capital investment projects that provide a return on our investment, of course. And I know that we had staff costs allocated to TIF, so after those costs were considered, because they're going to be ongoing, we'd have roughly $800,000 to play with, plus or minus. I haven't seen that mentioned, or I haven't heard that mentioned since the TIF sunset. Is that still there?
So actually, if you think back to when our TIF sunset, the council decision was to reduce mills, 10 mills. And so, back then it was equivalent of about, we'll just say 40,000 for easy math. So we actually stopped collecting $400,000 from taxpayers. So we actually offset that growth in the taxable value. So we have the 400,000 that was probably 450 for staff. 400,000 we gave back to taxpayers that did not collect. And then during COVID, we gave back another 10 mills on top of that. So we gave back another $400,000 roughly. So we've really actually alleviated the tax burden on our taxpayers through using a TIF. So that's what helped us get through the pandemic. I would say though, when I look at the financials, and I pulled up the wrong one and I was just gonna pull this one up. When I look at the CIP and look at our capital improvement plan for streets, I would comfortably be able to tell you that we could spend down reserves in that fund to at least address items 1 and 2. That's an additional $460,000 that we would need. That will wipe out the estimated remaining cash balance for street projects for fiscal year 23. But we do know that, this would probably span a couple fiscal years potentially, since we have to go through the bidding process and everything. Also knowing that those figures that are provided to us could be way off because of inflation, and those could continue to go up. So that would be my recommendation. I understand that the fence isn't significantly more, but I would prefer to wait on that until we get into the budget for fiscal year 24. If we do see a recession, it could really change kind of the finances of the city. And I would say that, if that does happen, actually costs probably come down, and it's probably a better time to build something like this. But I would say comfortably, I could tell the council you could move forward with 1 and 2.
In your opinion, and maybe this is a question for Craig, how positioned is the city for these grant opportunities that are coming down the pipeline, many of which are kind of geared towards safety improvements? And the reason I ask that is, does it make sense to not do the shared use component, because that is safety related, and wait on that component until we seek out grant opportunities? I certainly don't want to do that, but just trying to be somewhat fiscally responsible. If there's opportunities to bring grant dollars in the door to address safety deficiencies, I'm all for it.
I'll give you my opinion, and Craig can give you his after, but we already have a bike path there. We already have a separated pathway. Just expanding it to allow two-way traffic on both sides, I don't think will actually rise to the level of safety when you're looking at other communities that say don't have any path. Yeah. So the amount of effort to apply and wait, I personally don't know that we would have success in the safety grants.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah.
I think maybe the one where we're tightening up the crosswalk at Railway, that could be a safety concern. But if we have to go through a study for how many incidents we've had, I just don't see that on the viaduct itself.
Well, and the railway intersection improvements are $130,000 to $160,000, right, a portion of which are going to be borne by the developer on the west side. So I think that's a pretty low-hanging fruit we can tackle as a city.
Yep.
So thank you. I appreciate the candidness on that. Andy.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. I mean, I'd like to see us move as fast as we can with all of the phases, but
obviously we can't do that from a financial standpoint. If we could do the first two, I think that would be a good thing, I think. But the thing I actually really liked tonight more than anything was the elimination of the slip lanes, because those are not that confusing to drivers, because drivers typically just don't pay attention to pedestrians. They're super confusing to pedestrians, especially southbound on the viaduct coming by the O'Shaughnessy. It's just, people stop and there's no efficiency when there's pedestrians, because nobody knows kind of what to do, and kids come over there on bikes and they come over there on skateboards, and so I'd like to see that. I think that, Dana, you're right on with that. I think that's a good safety thing that we could look at a grant opportunity for. But other than that, I'd like to, I think the bike path is important to get started, and if that's all we can fund to begin with, then I think we should fund that. I think widening those is important, because it is a safety issue there for sure. I mean, I go over the viaduct a lot, and it's, whether you're walking or biking or people pushing strollers or whatever, it's not safe currently. So I'd like to see us do that and do as much as we can and see what we can find out there for grant opportunities, so.
Entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
So that would be authorizing Public Works to initiate Phase 1 and Phase 2, or just proceeding with Phase 1 and Phase 2. Craig, is that an adequate motion? And then, of course, encouraging the city to look at opportunities to fund the railway intersection improvements as immediate needs. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And that motion does carry on a 3-1 vote, with Councilor Galtabiano voting in opposition. Secondly, transitional zoning. I know Dave's looking for some, direction. We've been through multiple public hearings. This has been considered by the council on multiple occasions, and I think we need to provide some, direction here in the near future back to our planning staff, whether we'd like to see this on a future agenda or not. Any thoughts? I know where you stand on this, so. Rebecca.
I'm okay with moving it forward. I do think it's ideally would be a great place to grow residential, because it's so close to town. But we do have to plan for the highway interface for commercial and retail and all that. So I think we should move it forward. I would like to add what Andy's idea was to have some limitations on the size that is allowed. Like 14,000 is the largest that we have in the city, so I think that would be appropriate.
The Mountain Mall's much larger.
Oh yeah, the Mountain Mall, right.
Even
But
Safeway is
nothing's-
bigger than that.
And Safeway, yeah. So Dave, you were saying 20,000.
You know, 15 might be okay.
Well,
20, I mean, it's just
I
tough
think
because somebody
rather than
might have
a
some specific
ra-
use that we're not anticipating, that wouldn't be bad. I mean, and we're talking about the footprint, so they could have 2 stories or whatever.
and I still am very concerned about traffic safety out there. In town, people are going 35 miles an hour or 45 when they're entering town, but mostly it's pretty slow, so we don't have the same risks in town with that kind of big tractant. So I would like to see that added, just so that we keep the scale smaller out there.
So we discussed in our work session, just to move past this request, Rebecca, currently a CUP is triggered at 7,500 square foot. We'll ask staff to bring us back an inventory of the square footages on existing buildings in the WB2. I think Dave's already compiled that information, or Wendy, for a previous work session, in order for us to evaluate what that maximum square footage may look like for this transitional zoning district. Would that be satisfactory?
Yeah, and then if we did clarify that, it would go under bulk and scale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Secondly, there was a comment made regarding PUD requirements. I'd like to just at least have that
B in lieu?
PUD.
Oh, PUD requirements?
Yeah, and, reference to what other communities are doing. I don't know if there's any validity to
No, I
that.
mean, I think Kalispell does have, they do allow some annexations with a PUD process, but I mean, to require that for every single development, I mean, somebody could take one of these lots and subdivide it into, 20 small individual commercial lots or residential lots. And then if somebody wanted to build a house, would you, require that every single person to have to come in through a PUD? It doesn't make any sense, right? So, I mean, it does make sense for a large development, and most likely they will have to anyway, just because of the nature of the beast to deal with all the traffic and deal with, whatever the uses are.
Okay.
I just don't feel like it's something that we could require every project to come in with a PUD when you don't know what somebody's gonna develop or if they subdivide or whatever they're gonna do. One thing, I mean, that I was thinking about a little bit, and Carter made that comment about nursing retirement homes. Currently, they're under the conditional uses. If that's something that we felt like would be a really appropriate use, we could move those in the permitted uses as an incentive for that type of a use. I don't know if that's something you guys would consider, but just something that after his comment made me think about that.
Further
Still like it
comments
to
on
be
this
conditioned.
topic? Do we want to see this moved forward to a future agenda item? Showing of hands. And that's unanimous. Dave and
Okay.
Dana. Of course, Ben.
Craig, not to put you on the spot, but I did make a comment about the orderly development of transportation. And what I mean by that is just, I mean, I know we're talking about high-density residential and other things that have a lot of vehicle trips, and how do we just make sure that we're not creating a death trap down there?
Microphone, Craig. Yep. Sorry. Yep.
And I'm not talking about just the intersection. I mean, I'm really thinking all the way down south on the highway.
Yeah, so it's definitely going to be a traffic impact analysis that involves a considerable amount of time and effort and collaboration between the city, the developer, the traffic engineer, and MDT. We have a variety of different, possibilities that we've shown for that intersection. I don't know that we've really ever received much comment from MDT on, a future traffic circle. Is it going to be improved traffic signals? But I guess all I can tell you, Ben, is that this one's just going to take a lot more thought ahead of time and a lot more, thoughtful collaboration in order to make it work.
Because it seems like we'll have projects coming forward, and some of them will be large enough to do highway improvements, and some of them won't. Yeah, it's just, I mean, does anybody ever pre-build intersections or require intersections at certain points on the highway, or some way of sort of guiding all the cars into the correct way?
Yeah, and we talk about it, in the transportation plan. We talk about it in terms of concurrency in our transportation plan, and it is something that's required. And I guess what I'm trying to get across is that this is just, I think, going to be a different level of adhering to that requirement, given the current complexity of that intersection and the current density that we're contemplating adding to that intersection. So, the future, construction or what the designs are, of course, are going to be dependent on what the proposed use or traffic increase is. But yeah, there's situations where, of course, we could, build those improvements and make sure those are done, prior to occupancy.
You think that what it sounds like you're saying is we're okay to evaluate this on a case-by-case basis going forward?
I think it's going to have to be on a case-by-case basis. I mean, we can determine, through zoning what, spectrum of land use we expect or will accept, But until we have an approved plan, or until we have a specific proposed development, we can't go out there and, require a developer or have the city or the state, make improvements.
And then just one last thing is the threshold to do a TIS, which would trigger all of those conversations, is what?
It's 200 trips,
Okay, which is, yeah,
which we're
that's-
going to be way over.
Okay.
I mean, anything that happens at that intersection is going to trigger a TIS.
Yeah, and again, I'm not just talking about the intersection, I'm talking about the whole
Well,
highway.
yeah, I mean, each particular application, the trigger is 200 trips per day.
Okay, thank you.
Ben, just one more thing to add to that. One of our general requirements within this zoning district is that shared driveway access or frontage roads, whether public or private, are required where possible to provide a cohesive internal circulation pattern and to consolidate access onto arterials and collectors. So, I mean, that's gonna be a requirement for anything that comes in as part of the, zoning review, is how they're dealing with that stuff. And, as Craig mentioned, MDT is gonna be the ultimate say of what happens there. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of, right in or right out only kind of things. I mean, there's no way they're gonna allow people to cross the highway at those kind of vehicle speeds and things like that if there's some kind of a major development. And there's also an access study that's being done, and I don't know all the details. Karin knows a little more, maybe Craig does too, but MDT's doing an access study all along the highway there, so there may be some additional stuff that comes out of that as far as consolidation and how to better deal with, traffic.
Rebecca, one last comment?
So I have a lot of respect for traffic engineers, but I have never seen a developer's traffic engineer say they shouldn't build something. And so I think they're paid to make sure things happen. So this is a situation where I wish we could hire our own traffic engineer before proposals come in and actually have, I mean, I know I brought this up, I'd like to have our own traffic engineer as a consultant even that looks at our whole grid work in the city that is a little bit less biased towards making sure that a project goes through, so that we actually had more of an objective measurement of what kind of standards we're going to go for. So I'm not really comfortable planning an area that has poor traffic ratings and adding a lot more to it, and that's exactly what's happened at 93 and 40. It's already poor. So I just wish we could hire someone that isn't coming in with a bias towards a development, that would give us a realistic picture of what we can, what limitations we need to have out there before we approve things and make it even worse. So I would like us to have an independent study at some point.
Thanks, Rebecca. Is that enough direction, Craig and Dave? Thank you. I'll wrap up my comments here. Maria, where are we with our work session from a number of months ago regarding commercial use in Haskell Basin? Has that been memorialized with Legacy Partners?
It has not. We have an upcoming LLAC meeting where we will be looking at some recommended revisions from Legacy Partners and Glacier Nordic Club on number of events and number of partner programming that is that would take place out there. Those revisions have been sent to the LLAC representatives for review, and then we'll come back to the table during that meeting and discuss, possibly have an approval or more revisions, depending on how the conversation goes.
Will the council see those revisions before it's memorialized?
The direction that the council gave the LLAC representatives was no commercial use and to work with them on the partner types of use. I think limited direction on how many events, but that that the representatives could move it forward at that point. If it is something that the council would like to see again, then we should know that before an approval at the LAC.
So
meeting.
we are holding our ground on the decision we made to restrict commercial use unless the for-profit entity teams with a nonprofit, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and Andy, that's your understanding? Okay. Do you see any need for the council to review any potential revisions or?
I mean, I don't think so. I think, direction that Steve and I were given was that we would move forward if we're comfortable, and if we're not, then we would come back.
Okay.
I think that's probably the best way to do it, so.
Perfect.
But Maria sent out some redrafted language last week. Steve's commented, I haven't seen his comments, and I have yet to comment, so.
Okay. Great, thanks you too. And then finally, I just wanted to thank the council for your support and Dave, your help in sending our letter of opposition to the KM Ranch development that the Flathead County Planning Board rejected last week. Appreciate the support. I think it was certainly the right decision to make on the city, given some of the concerns we had with that development that were also voiced by hundreds of folks that live in and around that area. Those are my comments. We'll start with Rebecca, or start finishing with Rebecca.
Oh, nobody else is commenting tonight?
Andy commented.
Okay.
We have
Okay.
Ben and Giuseppe still?
All right, so the first one is, one of my neighbors, I live down by the footbridge, and his family has lived on the river for 70 years or so. So I met him out at the state park area, and he's noticing a lot of erosion along the river. And he brought up the fact that we created a wake-free zone along the river, and I think we can have electric motors, but no other types of motors, with the assumption that we would not see erosion, but he thinks it's gotten quite a bit worse. And so I'm wondering if we could have a study commission to start looking at the erosion that is going on along the river. Where I live, it's horrible along where the footbridge is, and also access points, so that we start to have mitigation plans for that. And I don't think we have any kind of committee to do that right now. We have a Lakeshore Protection Committee, but I wanted to formally request that, because when people live along the river and they're starting to report that and they're quite concerned about it, I think we should get ahead of it instead of allowing it to get worse. So I wasn't sure, do I need to formally get 2 other counselors to ask for a work session on that, or do we bring that through as a subcommittee of the Parks Board, or I don't know. But it's enough of a concern that people have brought it up to me often. Okay, so that's the first one. You guys can think about
Think
it.
about that.
Yeah, just, we are responsible for the natural world that we live in. And if people that live here and have lived here for a long time and love the river are starting to see its degradation, I think we should be doing things about it. The second thing is bears. I talked to our police chief and our bear management specialist last week, because the manor is having bear problems. And so Dana, I just wanted to confirm that we have a plan for the bears proofing of the manor.
We'll be removing their 300-gallon container and replacing it with a larger yard container so that they can have a bear-resistant container. So Rose was already working on that last week when I was out of town.
Yeah, and one of the person that lives there is concerned about if the individual people can lift up because they could be disabled or elderly, if they're going to be able to lift up things or not. So I didn't know what to tell them. So Bridger's been working, Chief Kelch has been working on our bear problem. We have 3 bears that might need to be euthanized, and unfortunately, we might have to actually kill all the bears. It's gotten that bad to actually have that discussion, because they are so problematic that when they try to relocate them, they immediately become problem bears in other areas. And so people need to really take it seriously that we humans are the problem. We're the ones that are putting trash out that the bears then assume is their diet. So I know, when will we be done with our bear proofing? It's going to be into November, or is it coming soon, Dana? Do you know?
Probably at least into November. It's going to be in like during November and then maybe even into early December. It just depends on when the manufacturer gets the containers to Republic Services.
Okay, so we don't have enough of them yet. Okay, so the public can still keep their trash in their garage or in their house, instead of leaving it out. It makes me really heartsick that we would be this bad, that we might be losing bears because of it. There are 2 grizzly bears on the outskirts of Whitefish, and they're collared. They're not problematic bears yet, but people should remember that they can travel up to 200 miles a day, so we might be seeing more grizzlies in town as well. I was wondering if the council would be willing to write a letter to the county commissioners requesting that they change the short-term rental requirements to have everybody have bear-proof containers. And that also I came up with another idea, is that NMAR, every time they sell a property, they could give someone a bear-proof container. That was what we're seeing a lot, is that because of our short-term rental amount in the perimeter of Whitefish, which is about 1,000, that's kind of when we start to see a lot of these bear problems too. So can we do that, or is that overreaching? Like,
I guess one of the concerns, Rebecca, I have is simply that the county is serviced by both Republic Services and Evergreen Disposal. Evergreen Disposal does not have any type of bear-resistant container available to their customers. So while the county could require it, there is some jurisdictional issues between the 2 hauling companies with their boundaries. I think what would be great to do, and we had at the Bear Fair, I know you attended, was that there's actually 2 organizations, not just FWP, but another organization that is focusing on educating short-term rental operators on bear safety for their visitors, as well as how do you keep the trash inside. And so I think we are actually looking at including that with our packets for our short-term rental applications to just give more education, but maybe that's something else that we could just push out there, at least on our website, on social media, to try to encourage short-term rental operators outside of Whitefish to also consider. I will say the City of Columbia Falls, they've gone and had an emergency ordinance to require garbage to be put inside. I think it's becoming more known in these areas. I don't know how far south into Kalispell. Obviously, they've had more bears in town than they've had in the past, but it's up to the council if you want to write a letter. I don't know what short-term rental regulations they really have at the county compared to like Columbia Falls and the city here.
well, I don't think it would hurt to ask anyways, because but you want me to write it, Dana, or do you feel comfortable
I'd like
writing?
to see 4 hands of the council to move forward with a letter like that, but you can personally write one.
Showing of hands supporting that idea, concept.
Okay, so I'm the wild card here. Okay. The other thing is, I like bears. I love them. I mean, I've hiked all over a glacier, and I just think they're wonderful beings, and I just am like, it's really hard to think that we might be the first ski town that has to eliminate all the bears, So another thing that has been brought up is to remove all fruit trees on city property.
That was already discussed. I'll let Maria talk about that, but I know that that's been discussed by the park board.
We have been working with the food bank to remove all of the fruit on public property.
The gleaning program?
Yeah, the gleaning program.
So what the request was from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks was for us to consider removing all apple trees and replacing them with non-fruit-bearing crabapple trees.
You received that request from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks?
Well, I talked to Justine a lot, yeah.
Okay.
So-
I haven't received that request. We've worked with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks on the fruit gleaning program, and they help advertise that. So I hadn't heard that piece. The park board did review the concept 2 years ago, and we opted to work with the food bank to remove all of the fruit from public property as a way to address that. And the food bank does utilize all of the fruit that they get.
That's in addition to the idea of removing fruit trees on public property. Around Lake McDonald, they had to do that years ago. They just cut down all the apple trees because the bears were coming in too close to humans. Okay, I probably have belabored this point that we are in trouble with bears, and so everybody needs to take it seriously, and I'm upsetting myself talking about it, so that I'll stop.
Thanks, Rebecca. Ben?
Yeah, I did have 2 or 3 things this evening. The first thing I wanted to make a comment on is funding for capital transportation projects. Now that we have adopted this wonderful new transportation plan, as Councilor Caltabiano correctly pointed out, we do not have identified funding sources for all of those upgrades. And it seems like one major funding source that we didn't discuss at that meeting last time was development, because it seems, as an example, if the Mountain Gateway project had been approved, that entire roundabout project would have been paid for by the developer in connection with that project. It seems very fair to me that development is required to pay its own way, or at least contribute to the impacts that they cause on the transportation system. And to that end, I do think it would be helpful for us to consider, as maybe we already do, but whenever there's a large development, some analysis or commentary about what impact does this have on this intersection or this thing that requires this many dollars, and would it be fair to ask the developer to contribute to it? You know, and for the big projects, not the small ones. Just a thought. I don't know how that gets implemented going forward, or if it's worth implementing, but I think it'd be worth thinking about. You know, this one tonight was a good example. My second comment is, we heard tonight something that's come up, I think, more than once. Has to do with the notification requirement distance. As I do feel that generally notifying the public is a good thing, and it seems like we've heard before folks complaining that they didn't get notified, and especially again with bigger projects more than smaller ones. But it seems like a wider area of notification could be considered for development applications in some circumstances, in my opinion. And then my last comment or suggestion has to do with the planning board meetings. I have found myself, you know, the planning board is often the first time that projects get public comment, and as you've seen, there's been a lot of public comment, and for some projects going through the planning board, you get a lot of public comment. Sometimes it seems like more than we have here in the council chambers. And I found myself before wishing I could watch it or see the planning board meeting, and not being able to watch it live at the time. And it maybe it's just me, or maybe there's others that feel the same, but if there was a way to publish planning board meetings on YouTube, I think that the public could benefit from that. I don't think, in my mind, the WebEx participation is not quite as useful, or maybe it is, but the important thing would be being able to actually watch the meeting later or at your convenience. So if there was a way to easily do that, I have no idea what it entails, but it seemed like it'd be useful, and that's my comment.
Dana, do you mind commenting on that? Because I couldn't agree more with Ben's.
Yeah, so
thoughts on
our wizard in the back would have to let us know if he's available, but
He
it
is.
comes down to funding. So, oh, he's already at the planning board.
He's already at the
Oh,
planning board meetings
perfect.
doing audio.
Then, Jake, how about you answer this question?
Jake, can you come out to the dais, please?
I'm sure that there's a way for us to be able to do that.
Okay. I agree with Ben's comments on that. Sure, please. This is the wizard, Jay Cook.
Can I go move the camera to your face?
The question posed to me is what is the availability and the options for broadcasting the planning board?
Yep.
It's totally doable. It's just a matter of scheduling those meetings and then broadcasting it, doing a live switch. I mean, they're not as exciting as these meetings.
But you get paid the same.
But maybe to some they are. Well, I can't switch the cameras to me.
So you'd be available to provide that service if Dana felt it was
Yes.
doable from a financial standpoint? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, sounds
I
good.
did.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you, Jake. Good to see you on this side. Anything further, Ben? No. Thank you. And Giuseppe? You good? Thank you. Anything further from staff? Craig?
Can I do just a quick public service announcement? We are beginning leaf pickup for the 2022 year, and we are no longer collecting bagged leaves. So those that haven't gotten the news, we have a new leaf vacuum. On the city's website, we show very clear directions if you have curb and gutter where to put your leaves, if you don't have curb and gutter where to put your leaves, and we're asking people to follow those instructions so we can come suck up your leaves and use a whole lot less plastic bags. And alternate side parking is in effect, and it's very important that people begin to adhere to those alternate side parking rules so we can take care of the leaves.
And there's a schedule online for the leaf pickup?
You know, we don't have a specific schedule yet because we're still getting to know this new equipment.
Okay.
But later on this leaf season, I expect to have a schedule, and then going forward, we'll be able to kind of work into districts.
Perfect. Thanks, Craig. On that note, I believe we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.